So I want to base this video specifically towards parents of children who self-harm, just because I want to help them understand it and I want to help them to know what to do in that situation, because it happens more often than not. So self-harm is such an extremely touchy subject just because most people don't understand it and they don't really know what it's about. But being someone who has personally dealt with it, I specifically dealt with cutting for around 10 years. And I'm here just to help parents and even siblings of people who self-harm be at ease, okay? So what really does self-harm entail? So also my computer is down here, so if I'm looking down at that, I just don't want to miss any points on this because this is such an important subject to me and I want to make sure I hit all the points. So pretty much everyone knows the most popular ways of self-harm, whether it's cutting, burning, bruising, scratching, different things like that. Like I said, personally, I dealt with cutting for about 10 years. But there's also more hidden ones. There's things like eating disorders, putting yourself into risky situations, and there's even more simple ones. Well, I don't want to say simple, but things like over shopping. It's basically self-destruction, things like that. So the worst part about this struggle with self-harm is telling someone, talking to someone, because when you first start out doing it, you don't feel normal. You don't feel as though you have anyone that's going to understand, and that's the hardest thing, is to feel alone. But I just want to say, it's so cliche, but you're not alone, because I promise you more people are dealing with this than you actually think, okay? But as far as telling your parents, I feel like that is one of the biggest things you should be able to do. And parents, I want you all to be able to accept that with open arms and not react a certain way, because it's not going to help. So the first thing I want to talk about is that cutting is an addiction. Okay, now someone who has not dealt with cutting can not possibly understand this, so it's more of like they see it and someone says that, they're gonna judge that, right? But I specifically still struggle every single day with this addiction, because I wake up in the morning and something happens. The one thing I want to do and turn to is self-harm, but I know that I can't do that, right? Now, it gets to a certain point where you feel like you can't live without it. And that's the threshold that's scary, because then it gets worse and worse. I started out with just scratching. I would use debit cards or just anything with like a little sharp edge, but I wouldn't cut the skin. Now, that threshold was reached very, very early, and it got to where it wasn't enough. That pain wasn't enough. So I moved on to something more intense. I started using razor blades and things like that, and I did start cutting into the skin, and now I have scars that will live with me for the rest of my life. Now, something else that's really, really touchy is that just because someone self-harms doesn't mean they want to die, okay? Doesn't mean they're suicidal. The entire 10 years that I was cutting, I would say that I had suicidal thoughts maybe a handful of times. My biggest thing was that I wanted to feel alive. I didn't want to die, okay? So this is one of the biggest things that people deal with, because they think they have to hide it in fear that someone might send them away, because they'll think that they're trying to kill themselves or, really trying to hurt themselves. But that's not how it works. When someone is hurting themselves, they want to feel alive, they want to feel real. And when they see those cuts or when they see that blood, it makes them feel like they're real, right? And, to someone who doesn't really understand it, it doesn't make sense. But that's okay. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to make sense of it for you. Now, back to it being an addiction, the easiest concept for me to compare it to would be smoking. Now, for me, I've never smoked, so I'm not addicted to smoking. So if I see someone and they're really struggling with it and it's causing them a lot of health problems, I'm like, okay, so why don't you just put the cigarette down and don't smoke anymore? But for someone who smokes, they're going to look at me like I am a crazy person, because it's nearly impossible to just stop cold turkey. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but it happens, right? So for cutting, it's kind of the same thing. Now, you're not going to experience all the crazy withdrawals if you stop cutting compared to smoking. I'm not saying that. I'm comparing the addiction to it, right? So it's the same feeling when you self-harm. But the feeling of needing it is always there, even after you overcome the addiction, okay? It's always gonna be there. Now, the second thing I wanna talk about is that you're gonna deal with relapses, okay? As a parent, when your child comes to you and says, I am doing this, or even if, you know, someone they've talked to comes to you and says, hey, your child is doing this, the first thing you need to do is do your research, okay? Before you go to them, or before you really get into any kind of conversation, do your research on it so you can kind of understand where they're coming from. Because the worst thing that can happen is them feeling comfortable being able to talk to you, and then you getting angry or frustrated or whatever the case may be, and then they feel like they've done something wrong, okay? They feel like they're a failure to you, that they're not good enough, okay? So the biggest thing that you need to do is do your research, okay? The second thing is, like I said, you're gonna deal with relapses, okay? Once your child comes out to you, the one thing you're gonna wanna do is get them into therapy. Now, they're not gonna wanna do this. I didn't. I thought it was crazy. I had never even understood what therapy was, and I thought it was for people who weren't mentally stable, okay? I wasn't mentally stable though, so knowing that, I knew how badly I needed it, okay? So you're gonna wanna get them some professional help. You're also gonna wanna get yourself professional help too, because you're not gonna be able to do this alone. This is a struggle, like I said, that I've been dealing with for 10 years now, and I still struggle with it every day. Now, I don't self-harm anymore, but I still struggle with the thoughts, okay? So, as a parent, you definitely want to, you know, get that professional help so that you know what to do. Getting yourself a therapist, and I always say, everyone needs a therapist just because it's an outlet, you know, doesn't mean you're crazy or that you're insane. It means that you have someone you can go to once a week or once a month and just let out all of your feelings, all of your emotions without having any kind of bias whatsoever. They're just going to be there to help you. And they're going to give you resources that may help you help your child. So back to the relapsing. I know I'm kind of all over the place. This is my very first video, so I'm just kind of getting the hang of it. And if you have any suggestions for me, please let me know so that I can do better. But anyways, back to relapsing. Once you get them in this therapy or this professional help, they're not going to want to talk, first of all, okay? They're not going to, you know, open up for the first few sessions. Be patient and always push them to keep going, because it's just going to get better and better and better. They're going to get to a point where they're going to say, okay, I'm going to go so many days being clean from self-harming, okay? The problem with this is they get to a certain number and then they feel the need to relapse again, because again, it's addiction. It's going to take time. It takes work. It's not just going to happen overnight. And as a parent, you should understand that too, because when they do relapse, because I promise it will happen, when they do relapse, you need to be there to comfort them and say, it's okay that you've done this. It's okay. And it's going to be okay. We're not starting over. We're going to keep pushing forward, because in their mind, let's just say they've been 50 days clean. They've just hurt themselves and now they're back to zero. So they see that as a failure, as having to start over all their hard work. You as a parent are going to push them and say, we're not starting over, we're going to continue. You just hit a roadblock, okay? So make sure they feel like they're not failing, because if they feel like they're failing, they're not going to progress. That's one of the biggest things my mom had to learn, is that when I went so many days clean, I would want to do it again, and I would, and then she would get angry with me. And it's not her fault. She is a wonderful woman. She's the most amazing human on this planet, but she didn't understand it, okay? And so that's, again, why I want to do this video so badly, so that parents that were in her same position know what to do, okay? Now, patience is the biggest thing. You have got to have patience with your child. Sit down and talk to them. Make them feel like they can come to you about anything, because more often than not, if they can feel that, they're going to come to you when they feel like they're going to relapse. They're going to come to you and say, hey, I'm feeling this and I'm scared and I don't know what to do or how to stop it, but I need you to help me. More often than not, they're going to do that, okay? But they're only going to do that if they feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you. So make sure you give them that resource. Make sure you make them feel loved and, comforted. That was the biggest thing for me. I didn't have that because no one in my family understood it. They hadn't gone through it. So it was just you need to stop. This is not normal. You are hurting yourself for no reason. You're drawing attention. And speaking of attention, that's also something else I want to hit on as well. And I'm so sorry for being so back and forth. I'm really trying to hit on all these points. And I tried to organize all this, but I'm just I don't want to read off of the script or anything or off a list. I kind of just want to go through it as I'm thinking about it, because, I try to relate to myself to make it more personable. But anyways, going back to talking about it being an attention-seeking thing. So more often than not, you're going to have kids, young adults who are cutting or hurting themselves for attention. Now, when I say for attention, I don't mean in a negative connotation. I mean they're crying for help. And the only way to be seen is to do something dramatic. I dealt with that for a while, and it took me a long time to really admit that. But I finally got to a point where I felt comfortable saying, okay, I did this for attention, but it wasn't to get people to look at me. It was to say, I need help and I don't know how to get it. So that's one of the biggest things in a lot of schools. If your child or a student is cutting or hurting themselves, I'm sorry, I don't mean to just talk about cutting, but it's the one that I know personally about. But if they're self-harming in a very visible place, such as their arms or their chest or somewhere like that, they more than likely, I'm not going to assume, but they more than likely want someone to reach out to them. They want someone to ask so that they can ask for help. So when you see that, don't say you're just trying to get attention, because yes, they are, but they're not trying to get you to look at them. They're trying to get you to help them. So if you can, help them. Tell a parent, tell a counselor, talk to the person, make them feel like they can come to you and talk to you instead of hurting themselves. So I think I've kind of hit on all the points that I've wanted to. And if I didn't, I am so sorry. Again, this is my first video. I'm so scatterbrained with this and kind of nervous, not gonna lie. But if I missed anything, please message me or drop a comment down below of some questions I can answer. And I'm gonna try to upload more videos about some different things involving self-harm as well. So what I want everyone to take from this is, if you know someone who hurts themselves, self-harms in some way, reach out to them. Make them feel like they're not alone, because that's the one thing I always dealt with, is just feeling completely alone and isolated, and it's scary. So Make them feel like they're not alone. Take them out for coffee. You know, make them feel like they're not crazy or insane, and then offer them some help. Parents, do the same. Help your children feel comforted, because that's one of the biggest things that parents struggle with, is connecting with their child. So now you have an opportunity to. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to message me. And remember, your mental health matters and you are not alone. I will link below the suicide prevention hotline. So if you need that, or you or a friend needs that, please feel free to click on that, or call that number. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you like this. Again, like this video, subscribe, and then comment some things, maybe some new videos you want me to do, or questions that you may have. So we'll see you all later.